Alright folks, buckle up, because today we're diving into the life of one of the most notorious outlaws of the Wild West. A man so infamous, they said he could shoot you dead and flash a grin before your body hit the ground. His name? Cherokee Bill. And no, this isn't some Hollywood anti-hero who redeems himself in the third act. This guy was as bad as they come. But his story? Oh, it's one for the ages. So let's rewind the clock to 1876. Crawford Cherokee Bill Goldsby was born on February 8th in Fort Concho, Texas, which was part of Indian Territory. Now, if you think growing up with a dad who was African-American and a mom who was Cherokee gave him some sort of identity crisis, think again. Cherokee Bill didn't have time for self-reflection. He was too busy becoming a living nightmare for anyone unlucky enough to cross his path. From a young age, Bill was surrounded by a mix of cultures and tough circumstances. His father was a Buffalo Soldier, one of the African-American soldiers who fought for the Union in the Civil War. His mother, on the other hand, hailed from the Cherokee Nation, a people who'd already been through their own fair share of tragedy, thanks to a little thing called the Trail of Tears. So the cards were stacked against Bill early on. But instead of folding, he played them his own way. Spoiler, he didn't play fair. Now you might be wondering, what makes a young kid turn into a full-blown outlaw? Well, for Cherokee Bill, it happened fast, and boy, did it happen furiously. By the time he was 12, Bill was already showing signs that he wasn't going to spend his days as a law-abiding citizen. But the real tipping point came in 1894 when a fight with a friend escalated into Bill shooting the guy dead. That's right, folks, his first confirmed kill, and he was barely out of his teenage years. And what did Bill do after committing murder? He shrugged it off, grabbed his hat and hit the road, kicking off a 2-year crime spree that would make the Wild West's most notorious bandits sit up and take notice. Cherokee Bill wasn't exactly the type to work alone, too much ego for that. So naturally, he linked up with the Bill Cook gang. And if you're thinking, wait, 2 guys named Bill in the same gang? Yep, it was like a 19th century version of the buddy cop movie, but in this case, they were robbing trains, banks, and basically anything that wasn't nailed down. The Bill Cook gang was a bunch of misfits who specialized in making the U.S. Marshals' lives a living hell. Together, they hit railroads, held up post offices, and generally wreaked havoc across Oklahoma. But here's the kicker. While other outlaws might rob you blind and leave you with a black eye, Cherokee Bill did it with a style that made people terrified of him. And yet, oddly, they admired him too. Cherokee Bill didn't just rob you. He made it look easy. Take the time he and his gang stormed the Wells Fargo express car during a train heist. They made off with a small fortune, but Bill? He allegedly tipped his hat and winked at a few passengers on the way out, as if to say, "It's nothing personal, folks, just business." Now let's talk about the moment Cherokee Bill really cranked the outlaw dial up to 11. Sure, robbing trains and riding with the Bill Cook gang was impressive in the world of criminal notoriety, but Bill had bigger plans. He wasn't just satisfied with being part of a gang. He was ready to become the Wild West's own one-man crime wave, and that's exactly what he did. In 1894, Bill's thirst for chaos hit new heights. Fresh off a string of successful robberies, Bill didn't just want to get rich, he wanted to be feared. It was during this time that he seemed to take pleasure in leaving a trail of bodies in his wake, earning himself a reputation that far surpassed most of the gang he was riding with. In one incident, while robbing a store in Nowata, Oklahoma, things went sideways, as they often did with Bill. A store clerk made the fatal mistake of trying to fight back. Bill, with that infamous grin of his, didn't hesitate. He shot the man dead on the spot. For Cherokee Bill, this wasn't just another robbery. It was a performance. It was a message to the world. Mess with Cherokee Bill, and you wouldn't live long enough to regret it. And as if that weren't enough, he also shot and killed a man simply because the guy insulted his little brother. Yep, Bill wasn't just an outlaw. He was the type of outlaw who'd defend his family's honor with a bullet. Even other criminals started to fear him. Some called him reckless, others called him heartless, but no one called him weak. This rampage across Oklahoma and Indian Territory cemented Bill's status as more than just a regular bandit. He was now in the upper echelon of outlaws, a place reserved for the most ruthless, cold-blooded, and unpredictable men the Wild West had ever seen. And the law was watching. They weren't just dealing with a bandit now, they were dealing with a killer. It was clear that Cherokee Bill was no longer content with just taking people's money. He was taking lives too. But Bill's reign of terror couldn't last forever. You see, when you rack up a body count like he did, and we're talking a dozen or so, law enforcement takes it personally. By the mid-1890s, Cherokee Bill's face was plastered on every wanted poster from Texas to Oklahoma. The bounty on his head? A whopping $1,500, which might not seem like much now, but back then, it was enough to make bounty hunters foam at the mouth. And Bill? He didn't care. He kept robbing and shooting his way across the countryside like it was some kind of twisted road trip. In fact, when he wasn't holding up stagecoaches or getting into gunfights, Bill was known to hide out in the Cherokee Nation, where he had plenty of connections. Now let's talk about Cherokee Bill's capture, because if you thought he'd go down in some legendary blaze of glory, well, sorry to disappoint. Bill was finally caught in 1895, and here's where the irony kicks in. After all those years of outsmarting lawmen and dodging bullets, he was turned in by none other than his own brother-in-law. Yep, family, always there when you need them, or when they want the reward money. Bill's capture was a huge win for the authorities, but it didn't come easy. When they tried to arrest him at his hideout, Cherokee Bill wasn't about to surrender without a fight. He opened fire, and even after being wounded, he managed to kill one of the deputies. Eventually, though, they overpowered him, and that was the beginning of the end for the infamous outlaw. When it came time for his trial, Cherokee Bill didn't exactly inspire sympathy. He sat there, cool as a cucumber, as witnesses piled on the evidence. In true Bill fashion, when asked if he had anything to say in his defense, he casually remarked, "I came here to die, not to make a speech." I mean, if you're going to go out, you might as well go out with a memorable one-liner, right? Despite his clear guilt, Bill's trial dragged on for months. His lawyers tried every trick in the book to get him off the hook, but the evidence was just too damning. On top of that, the public was out for blood. The people wanted to see Cherokee Bill hang, and on March 17, 1896, that's exactly what happened. Cherokee Bill's execution is the kind of thing that almost feels cinematic, except for the fact that it was all too real. As he stood on the gallows at Fort Smith, Arkansas, Bill was as calm and collected as ever. The hangman asked if he had any last words, and once again, Bill delivered with that devil-may-care attitude that had defined his life. His final words? "I came here to die, not to talk." Talk about staying on brand. The trapdoor was released, and with it, the life of one of the Wild West's most dangerous and charismatic outlaws came to an abrupt, albeit inevitable end. He was just 21 years old when he met the noose. Let that sink in. At 21, most of us are still figuring out life, but Cherokee Bill, he'd already lived and ended one that legends are made of. So what's left of Cherokee Bill's story? Well, he's not as famous as Billy the Kid or Jesse James, but his short and brutal life left an undeniable mark on the Wild West. Here was a man who, despite his youth, managed to terrorize an entire region and leave a trail of chaos in his wake. But what really makes Cherokee Bill stand out isn't just the bloodshed, it's the sheer audacity with which he lived. If you enjoyed this ride through history, hit that like button, subscribe, and stick around for more stories of the legends, the lawmen, and the lawless who shaped America's wild frontier.